two massive airplanes, one single runway, a wall of fog so thick even the pilots couldn't see what was right in front of them. In just a few heart-stopping seconds, a routine day turned into the deadliest disaster in aviation history. A collision so violent it changed the rules of flying forever. This isn't just about a crash. It's about how miscommunication, pressure, and one critical misunderstanding led to the loss of hundreds of lives. Welcome to Aviation Black Box, where we uncover the hidden truths buried deep within the world's most tragic air disasters. If you want to understand the mistakes that shaped modern aviation and ensure these lessons are never forgotten, subscribe now and join us as we open the black box of history, one flight at a time. Two massive airplanes, one single runway, a blanket of fog so dense that it swallowed everything in its path. On March 27, 1977, a quiet airport on a small Spanish island became the site of the deadliest accident in aviation history. 583 lives were lost in an instant, and the lessons learned that day would forever change how airplanes take off, land, and communicate. This is the story of how a series of small mistakes, unfortunate circumstances, and miscommunications came together to create a disaster that shook the entire world of aviation. The day began like any other for the crews of two of the world's most iconic airlines, KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, and Pan American World Airways, better known as Pan Am. Both companies operated the Boeing 747, a technological marvel of its time, the largest passenger aircraft in the world. These planes were giants of the sky, carrying hundreds of people over oceans and continents. KLM Flight 4805 was scheduled to fly from Amsterdam to Las Palmas, the capital of the Canary Islands. The captain of this flight was Jacob Veldhuisen van Zanten, one of KLM's most senior and respected pilots. In fact, his face was featured in KLM's advertising campaigns, symbolizing the airline's commitment to safety and professionalism. Alongside him were First Officer Klaus Moers and Flight Engineer Willem Schroeder. Pan Am Flight 1736 had started its journey in Los Angeles, with stops in New York, and then onward to Las Palmas. The crew included Captain Victor Grubbs, First Officer Robert Bragg, and Flight Engineer George Warnes. Their aircraft was filled with American tourists and vacationers excited to visit the beautiful Canary Islands for a holiday. Both flights were routine, scheduled, and perfectly normal, until an unexpected event disrupted everything. Earlier that day, a terrorist bomb had exploded inside the terminal at Gran Canaria Airport, the main international airport in the region. Authorities quickly evacuated the terminal and closed the airport temporarily to search for additional explosives. With Gran Canaria closed, incoming flights had to be diverted. The nearest alternative was Los Rodeos Airport on the island of Tenerife. Unlike Gran Canaria, Los Rodeos was a much smaller regional airport. It had only one runway and very limited taxiway space. It was never designed to handle multiple wide-body jets like the Boeing 747, let alone several at the same time. As a result of the diversion, Los Rodeos became congested almost immediately. Dozens of planes were parked wherever there was space, including on taxiways. Ground crews were overwhelmed, and communication was strained. Both KLM and Pan Am were diverted there, along with several other flights. This sudden, chaotic situation set the stage for what was to come. The Pan Am 747 landed first, followed shortly by the KLM 747. The two massive jets were parked near each other, and passengers waited inside the crowded terminal as authorities searched Gran Canaria for more bombs. The atmosphere was tense and frustrating. Everyone wanted to get back in the air and to their original destinations, but there was nothing anyone could do until the main airport reopened. As the hours passed, the crews began to face new challenges. For the KLM team, there was a major issue looming: duty time limits. Regulations in the Netherlands strictly limited how long a flight crew could be on duty before they were required to rest. If they didn't depart soon, they would be forced to spend the night in Tenerife, which would delay their flight even further and cause logistical chaos for the airline. Captain von Zanten was known as a disciplined and assertive pilot. He prided himself on punctuality and precision. The thought of further delays weighed heavily on him. When the crew learned that Gran Canaria would reopen soon, Van Zanten decided to use the waiting time productively by refueling the aircraft at Los Rodeos. This would save time later, allowing them to depart immediately after dropping off passengers at Las Palmas. While the KLM crew refueled, Pan Am decided to wait until they reached Gran Canaria to refuel. This difference in strategy would later become critically important. By the time refueling was complete, Gran Canaria was ready to reopen. The controllers at Los Rodeos began clearing planes for departure, but there was a problem. The taxiway at Los Rodeos was blocked by other parked aircraft. The only way for planes to reach the runway was to back taxi. In other words, to use the same runway for taxiing that would also be used for takeoff. This was not unusual at small airports, but on this day, with multiple 747s and worsening weather, it was extremely risky. Adding to the danger, heavy fog began to roll in, reducing visibility to a few hundred feet and sometimes even less. What had been a clear afternoon quickly became a situation where pilots and controllers could barely see anything. The tower had no ground radar, which meant air traffic controllers could not see exactly where planes were. They relied entirely on radio communication and position reports from the crews. Therefore, instruction had to be heard, understood, and repeated correctly. Any misunderstanding could be catastrophic. As visibility dropped, KLM received clearance to taxi first. The controller instructed von Zanten to taxi all the way down the runway, make a 180-degree turn at the end, and line up for departure. Once KLM was ready, Pan Am would follow, taxi down the runway, and take a left turn onto the third exit taxiway to clear the runway. This was a complex plan, especially in fog. The turnoffs were poorly marked, and the Pan Am crew struggled to identify them. They were unfamiliar with Los Rodeos, and the fog made navigation almost impossible. Meanwhile, Van Zanten was anxious. His crew duty time was ticking closer to its limit, and he wanted to depart immediately. After completing his turnaround at the end of the runway, he positioned the KLM 747 for takeoff. At this point, the crucial sequence of miscommunications began. The controller instructed Pan Am to taxi down the runway and exit at the third taxiway. Captain Grubbs and First Officer Bragg were confused because the turnoffs were not clearly visible. They proceeded slowly, carefully counting the intersections. At the same time, the controller told KLM to stand by for takeoff clearance. The exact words used were ambiguous, especially in English, which was not the controller's first language. Van Zanten, perhaps eager to leave and believing he had been cleared, responded by saying, "We are now at takeoff." The controller, realizing the potential confusion, quickly replied, "Okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you." But because of radio interference, the critical part of this message was blocked. In those days, simultaneous transmissions could overlap, creating static and making certain words inaudible. KLM's crew did not hear the correction clearly. They believed they had been cleared for takeoff. Without waiting for further confirmation, Van Zanten pushed the throttles forward and began his takeoff roll. As the KLM accelerated, Pan Am was still on the runway, taxiing toward the exit. Inside their cockpit, the Pan Am crew suddenly saw faint lights emerging through the fog, a horrifying realization that another aircraft was speeding straight toward them. First Officer Bragg shouted, "There he is! Look at him! Goddamn, that son of a bitch is coming!" Captain Grubb slammed the throttles forward and attempted to turn off the runway. The massive 747 began to veer left, but its size and speed made it impossible to move quickly. Meanwhile, Van Zanten saw the Pan Am aircraft too late. He desperately tried to lift off early, pulling back on the controls to get airborne before impact. The nose gear left the ground, but the rest of the plane was still too low. At 160 miles per hour, the KLM's nose lifted over the Pan Am, but its undercarriage struck the Pan Am's fuselage with devastating force. The KLM's engines ripped through the upper deck of the Pan Am, tearing the structure apart. Fuel ignited instantly, and a massive fireball engulfed both planes. The sound was deafening. Witnesses described it as a rolling explosion that seemed to shake the entire airport. The fog amplified the horror, trapping the fire and smoke around the wreckage. Everyone aboard KLM died instantly. On the Pan Am, a few brave souls managed to escape through a wing and slide down to safety before flames consumed the cabin. In total, 583 people lost their lives. It was the deadliest accident in aviation history, a record that still stands today. In the aftermath, investigators faced an immense challenge. They sifted through wreckage, black boxes, and radio recordings to understand what went wrong. The final report revealed a chain of errors, ambiguous phraseology between the controller and KLM, radio interference that blocked critical messages, poor visibility due to fog, lack of ground radar to track aircraft positions, pressure on Van Zanten due to duty time limits, and delays. No single mistake caused the crash. Instead, it was a perfect storm of small problems aligning at exactly the wrong moment. The tragedy shocked the world. Aviation authorities acted swiftly, introducing sweeping reforms, standardized cockpit communication using precise, unambiguous terms like "cleared for takeoff" and "hold position," mandatory ground radar at major airports to monitor runway traffic. The development of crew resource management, a system designed to improve teamwork and decision-making in the cockpit, ensuring that co-pilots felt empowered to question captains if they saw a mistake. These changes have saved countless lives over the decades. Every time a pilot pauses before takeoff to confirm clearance, every time a co-pilot speaks up to prevent an error, they are honoring the memory of those lost in Tenerife. For the families of the victims, the pain never truly faded. Many spoke about how a simple vacation had turned into unimaginable loss. Survivors described their escape as a miracle, haunted by the images of those who didn't make it out. Even today, More than 4 decades later, the Tenerife disaster serves as a stark reminder of how fragile safety can be when communication breaks down. 2 planes, 1 runway, a fog-covered airport where every second mattered. On that tragic day, the voices of 583 lost souls were silenced forever. But their legacy lives on in every checklist, every radio transmission, and every cautious decision made by pilots and controllers around the world. This was the day 2 giants collided, and the world of aviation was changed forever.